All right, well, thank you. Yeah, morning, guys. Let me just share my screen whilst I talk through a few different bits. Okay, hope you can see what I'm seeing now. This is a marketing tool called SEMrush. I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with it. It's a really useful tool for things like keyword management and for building your organic strategy. And I just wanted to have this up on screen whilst I talk through a few different elements of how we approach our marketing. I think our biggest challenge as a business is probably just the sheer number of competitors that we have in the marketplace. So obviously we did the exercise earlier in this course about the five Ps. I think, yeah, our biggest challenge is definitely competitors. I think it's been estimated that there's over 1,000 different LMS providers in our marketplace, each with their own specialism or focus area. So you really have to differentiate yourself in order to stand out. A lot of our competitors are also considerably better funded than we are. So we've got Docebo, who have taken on over $120 million in funding at their IPO. Absorb have taken on 60 million in funding, Fuse 30 million, and pretty much everyone in the marketplace have been funded in some form or another. But we've never taken on any major investment, and we've always worked with relatively meager marketing budgets, I would say. And yet we still do manage to compete in a lot of key areas. There's some areas where we're not quite as competitive, but when you look at our organic keywords and our organic traffic and authority score, we do match or beat the majority of our competitors in that area. I think just looking at organic keywords, we are way ahead of most, and organic traffic, we're only really behind Docebo, I think. So yeah, I think we are able to do quite a lot with little, and I think the reason we've been able to achieve this is mostly down to two things. I'd say consistency and focus. So we've picked a strategy and we've stuck with it for well over a decade at this stage, and that is basically focusing on creating really valuable, engaging content that helps to establish us as thought leaders. We now have thousands of, not thousands, hundreds maybe, of quality blogs on the website that focus on specific keywords. So we're focused on learner engagement as a business. So we build our content strategy around that. We target specific keywords. We write short form content that meets those needs and answers specific questions that people might have when they search for relevant learning terms. And then we wrap that short form content up into gated content. So things like white papers or tip sheets or checklists, and use that as a lead magnet to get people into our CRM where they can be nurtured further. And then we amplify that through other channels like social media and digital marketing events. I think if we had a bit more time and resource, that's probably where we'd focus some more of our efforts to build out some of this further. So yeah, it's all basically built around our content strategy. The content then fed into our CRM, which is HubSpot, and that allows us to then track their engagement over time and start nurturing them so that they're ready to be handed over to the sales team here at Growth Engineering. I don't think it's a particularly groundbreaking approach, but I think it works because we've stuck with it. We've been consistent. We have a really clear focus and differentiation, and we've now been in the market long enough and have a strong enough brand presence that we are able to attract a very strong audience. So yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to mention. I hope that's been helpful. Did someone have a question? Is there any questions on that?
Yeah. Hi, Harry. Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to ask. You mentioned like kind of that you guys have managed to be competitive in key areas, and you kind of said like when you look at keywords, and I was just wondering what does that mean exactly? How do your keywords reflect kind of how are they a marker of success? And also I just wasn't quite sure what's the difference between an organic keyword and a paid keyword.
Great questions. Okay, so organic keywords are words that so when you publish content, you'll specifically target certain keywords. So say I write a blog on gamification, the keywords in the article will be things like gamification, game mechanics, maybe the specific game mechanics that I mentioned, and that's all organic traffic. It's not traffic that you've paid for. It's stuff that comes to your website just by going through Google, searching for certain terms, and then finding your website via it. So it all happens organically. Whereas paid keywords is stuff that comes through things like Google Ads or other channels that you're paying for. So you're buying that traffic essentially. So that's the differentiator. And in terms of how it affects traffic, basically the more keyword coverage you have, the more traffic you're going to get to your site, because the more often you'll appear in Google search pages and other search engines. So basically, you do want to increase your keyword coverage, but you also want to make sure you're focusing on the keywords that matter to your business, especially when you're starting out. I wouldn't say just try and get as many keywords to try and rank for as many keywords as possible. I'd say try and figure out what your most important search terms will be, what the relevant keywords will be for that, and then target that. And then when you're ready, you can start expanding and building out around that. But yeah, okay. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thanks.
I mean, the other thing that I think is really interesting is when we talk about tail ends of, so for us, we sell learning management systems, right? But obviously the paid for search, everybody who sells a learning management system basically backs learning management systems. So with Harry's kind of organic keyword strategy, we are, of course, saying we have a learning management system, but it's the tail end words. So people that are looking for learner engagement, gamification, those are the things that we're leaning into and making sure that as well, in every article we write, not only are we mentioning the actual product, LMS or whatever, but it's also that kind of like that golden why. What do? We do learner engagement, and we do that through gamification. And so those are also, when Harry's thinking about his content strategy, is like, those are the words that we constantly need to hit on, because that is what differentiates us. And so if we don't want just anyone who wants an LMS, we want somebody who basically is interested in learner engagement, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The same's true of pay-per-click as well. So if we were to run a pay-per-click campaign based around the term LMS, which is obviously like our focus product, that would probably cost, I think, between $30 to $50 per click. So you can see how that would get really expensive really quickly. But then if you target a longer tail keyword like gamified LMS or social LMS or something like that, then you're looking more like $10 to $20 per click. And it's also more focused as well. You're getting people who are focused around your have a bit more focus around what your product actually offers, so you're getting better value and more focus essentially if you go for those longer tail keywords. Gerard, did you have a question as well?
Yes, I was wondering if you mentioned the funding that the other guys have, if you can compare that. I don't know if these numbers are available. Could you say that if you combine organic and paid, that your revenue grows faster? So, or is that not the case?
It's a good question.
We've never had the luxury to find that out. Yeah.
We haven't done PPC seriously enough to have enough data to say. But it makes sense, right? If you're running both channels at once, then you would expect quicker growth. And I've heard suggestions that maybe Emil can comment on this. Heard suggestions that if you run pay per click at the same time can also help with your organic results by boosting that. No?
With Gerard, as long as you're running the ads, you're going to be on top results. But once you stop the ad, you stop the money, you're not going to be there. But when it comes to organic ranking, you're always there. Of course.
No, yeah, I understand that, but it's more about what is it that you do to get truly big. Yeah, growing your revenue from 50 million to 500 million, you need to do something.
Yeah, it's just like Facebook ads.
You don't get
it's
that.
just like online ads. Fast result with more
I mean,
money.
what I would say is, sorry, I'm on.
Okay, I understand what you say. We're just talking about social media, so to speak, because
No, the same for Google. The same for Google Ads.
yeah,
No,
okay.
Yeah, I think the more channels you use, the quicker you would expect to grow. But then again, it is easier to like turn the channels on one by one, so you can make sure that you're optimizing it properly and getting value for money.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that helps.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you, Jared. So sorry.
I just have a tiny little follow-up question. You mentioned the difference in the cost per click before in terms of keywords and long tail. How do you know how much it's going to cost you? Does Instagram give you that breakdown in terms of what you put in as your keywords, or how do you see what I mean? Like how do you know how much it's going to stretch if it's
when you design.
$10?
Sorry. Yeah, so when you're designing your ads, it will give you an estimated cost per click, and it will vary because it doesn't know how much your competitors are going to bid for the same terms over time. So it might go up, it might go down. Typically, it'll go up. So you set your bids basically for how much you want to bid for that specific term. Then you set your budget over a period of time as well. So at least you make sure you've got control over how much you can spend, and you've got a rough idea of how much you're paying for each time your ad will appear to, or each time they click on your ad, let's say. So yeah, Google and the other tools will give you like those indicative numbers, and you'll be able to make sure you can budget for it as well.
And if a competitor wants to use that, those keywords as well, that makes it more expensive per click, or
it depends how much they bid. If they outbid you, then potentially, yeah. And you can set it so that you match or beat bids as well on most of these tools. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's something we really went into a great amount of detail to, but it is essentially a bidding system.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks,
guys. Any other questions? Juliet, did you have a question, or you just raise?
I just wanted to just reflect on Gerard's comment about if you do organic really well and then you do paid as well, are you going to grow faster? I think it's a really interesting point, and one of the things that I would say is that it's extraordinary in our industry to basically pursue a strategy that Harry and his team have pursued, right? So getting it right from fundamentals, okay? And what I would say is that, again, as Amal said, it's a testament to, if you have the foundation right to start with, then when you do start paying, you might find that it really does blow up. But I think what's really interesting is when you look down our competitor list, they've had, quote unquote, a really lazy approach, right? So we haven't had the quality approach Harry and his team had for building our kind of organic keywords. So my takeaway from Gerard's comment and what Harry said is that where you should start is not paid. Where you should start is really identifying really good quality, content that you can push out there, make sure it's consistent. And then once you've done that for a year or two, then start building on that. And I don't know what you think about that, Harry, but that point that Gerard made definitely hit home for me. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. I think ultimately, I think that's a good point, Juliet. And I think, ultimately organic traffic is your most valuable traffic because it will stay with you for a long time before it starts to fade away. Whereas paid traffic, you're paying for it. As soon as you stop paying for it, you'll stop getting that traffic and you'll stop getting that interest. It also won't really impact your domain authority and your long-term standing on the web. So yeah, I would say always start with your organic strategy and then add channels as relevant. Add channels as relevant there. Yeah, Cosmo.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much Sam is gonna appreciate me throwing him into the fire like this, but I think whilst we're on the topic of like organic versus paid content, I think it might be worth tipping our hats to SEO and things like that. Sam uses SpyFu, which is a software. I don't know much about it, but I know, and Harry, I know you know a lot about SEO as well. But there's a lot of insights that you can do just for free, like figuring out backlinks and having an understanding of that can also really help. Like I said, I don't really know about it, I just know of it. So if Harry or Sam, if either of you have got any points on that, it might be.
That's great. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Sam.
So yeah, I was just going to say, so I use SpyFu. Now the only reason I use SpyFu and I don't use SEMrush or SEMrush is because the learning curve for SEMrush for me is just too much. Like I looked at it, I turned it on, and I'm like, literally, it's like Google Search Console combined with like 50 other things. So I don't use. What I do use is SpyFu, because SpyFu, and for example, Soraya, you might find that easier. SpyFu, literally, you just put in competitors' websites and see what keywords they have. You can look at how you rank against them. It's really easy. It's super intuitive. It's very basic. And they do have a free plan that you can just chuck in anyone's website and go, let's see what they're doing. What keywords have they got? It's indicative, but obviously it's not in any way as hardcore as SEMrush. So SEMrush is kind of like the platinum, superstar of SEO, but you're really going to have to really know what you're doing unless you've got someone who can help you, talk you through it. I've tried it. We signed up for it for 6 months and never really got any value out of it, more because we couldn't extract the value from it because it was kind of too difficult. In terms of kind of time that we had to put into that. So we used SpyFu, which was quite useful and gave us insights into what our competitors were ranking for, and then used our our posts and descriptions and things like that, blog posts, to sort of use more keywords and focus our content towards certain things where we realized we had holes where other clients did. Other competitors didn't have those holes.
Yeah, thanks. That's super handy.
I would co-sign that entirely as well. I think SEMrush is quite overwhelming at times, and there's definitely areas of the platform that I don't understand in full as well. So if there's a simpler version that will help you get started, then that's what I'd start as well.
You're on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Harry. I always think it's really, really useful to actually have somebody who can actually kind of, really give us a good case study of how that might work. So yeah, very much appreciate you taking the time to do that for us. The other thing is I just want to mention, I'm going to fly through this value selling presentation today, but I just want to sort of shout out, Gerard has got an absolute wealth of experience in sales. Okay, so if there are any serious kind of business to business companies out there that are selling technology like we are at Growth Engineering, Gerard is a very, very useful person to speak to. Sam has also had a wealth of experience in sales, so it's not just me on this call that basically understands sales. So I have invited them to jump on in if they think there's points they can make, and just know that it's not just me on this course that has an idea about sales. So I want to just talk a little bit now about value selling and this approach. Okay, so this approach isn't everybody's approach to sales, right? There are harder approaches to sales, but this approach to sales is the one that I have found consistently through my career works best, because ultimately you're looking for a win-win both on the client side and your side. So I've called it value selling because it's about ensuring that the you are not only ensuring that what you're selling to your client has value to them, but also the relationship that you have with them doesn't drag costs through the business. And there've been many times for us that, let's say we have had a salesperson that doesn't really understand exactly what we do or is not so well trained, you end up basically securing sales that are not right for your organization, and as a result it just trails a huge amount of cost all the way through the organization, which is bad for you and also bad for the client. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about what value selling is, then I'm going to go on to a model that will allow you to think about questions for your pipeline, okay, and that's called spin selling, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about best practice. There's a lot to know in sales, but basically what I want you to try and get used to the fact is that you're not selling uphill here, okay? If you find yourself, basically selling on features, selling on price, you're just in the wrong bag, okay? People don't like that kind of selling, okay? And what we want to get to is much more value selling, right? A kind, open heart. Have we got the same values? Do I understand what you want? Do you understand what I want? Can we work together collaboratively in order to grow our pie together? So I'm going to get the sale, but you're going to get a massive return on investment. Okay, that is the bottom line with value selling. And that's what we want to do, right? Get that beautiful synergy so we end up with customers and advocates. So if you find yourself, in a situation where you're doing this kind of selling, then basically you're just in the wrong bag. You're just in the wrong bag. And new salespeople to sales will always be here, right? Because they don't know enough about your products and services. So if you find people in your team that basically, are just not converting, it's because they're down here. Nobody likes that. Nobody likes that experience. What they want is here, right? People that are much more like strategists trying to understand how your two businesses, can work together to basically make a big difference in, customer outcomes. So the value selling components are really in and around this word that is used in all three boxes, values, right? Have we got a value that we are both aligned around in and around business impact, right? Are we going to have revenue growth together? Are we going to save money together? Are we going to have cost reduction together? Are we going to mitigate risks together? Are we on the same page with the business impact of our solution? The next thing is strategic value. What does it feel like to work with me, right? I am growth engineering, or we are growth engineering. We're into gamification, we're into engagement. Does that feel right for your organization? Is that important to you? I look at the relationship we've got with L'Oreal, and it's very much about making learning fun, exciting, engaging, joy. We're not a compliance platform. So have we got a strategic alignment about how we want L&D to think and feel to the employees that we're delivering it out of? And then finally, can you actually do the job? Like, do they trust you, right? Because so you might say, okay, I've got the best product or whatever, and strategically our values align. We're about to change the world in terms of people thinking about learning, but actually, can you do the job? And this is where, if a large company is going to work with you, they really do want to know that you have a team around you that can basically deliver that. So again, it's about being open and honest with the resources you have, the pricing that you've put together with that organization in order to ensure that they're comfortable, right? So really think about the values. None of that of what I've said there is about selling features. It's not about talking about price. It's about aligning around a common passion to basically change the world. Be that in marketing, be that in selling gin, be that in whatever it might be. And so what you want to do is you want to avoid, anything that is what I would say is hard value, okay? Not because you don't need it in your pack of information, but you shouldn't be discussing it because it's a hygiene factor, right? They're assuming it's already there. So, you shouldn't be talking about, direct costs or time saving. You should be talking about the things that motivate and get emotional resonance. You remember the beginning of the course, we were like, we have to connect at an emotional level with the people we do business with, right? So it's soft values, right? And it's not just because I'm a woman, so I'm like all fluffy. No, it's not. It's basically all humans are built the same, okay? It is about making a difference in the world. It's about delighting, exciting. It's about, feeling that you're doing a good job, and you're going to do it through these things, employee satisfaction, working with a brand that basically makes me feel better, innovation potential. These are the things that basically when they're talking about how, you know, when they get home at night and they're talking to their partner, they go, yeah, no, I had such an interesting conversation, so excited about this new organization, they're doing some amazing things, you know, in botanical gin, and I can't wait to do you see what I'm saying? So it's not the facts that are going to move the dial on emotion, it is this soft value. So really think about that, and if it feels like you're pushing and you're just not getting that emotional resonance, you know you're doing it wrong. Okay, it should feel positive because you're going into that client with things that make sense and resonate, you know, with them. So this is one model. It's a little bit old-fashioned, okay? I'm not going to lie to you. It's a little bit old-fashioned, but it's the one that basically I still think is useful for people who haven't had a huge amount of experience in sales, because it allows you to put structure in your sales pipeline, and it's very, very simple. Now, what I really like about spin selling was it is based on a huge amount of research, okay? A huge amount of research by this guy called Neil Rackham. And he did spin selling, and then he also did key account management. And I'm sure Jared is like this, and lots of people have built on his research, okay? But why I wanted to present this particular model is it's just really easy for you to then map out questions and know roughly where you might be in the value sales process, okay? It is particularly useful in B2B sales, but it's also, you're going to have to go through a similar sort of thing in B2C sales. So it might not be quite as complex, but it's still, in my view, highly relevant. So the key principles, and again, I said this yesterday, is 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? Questions are far more powerful than statements. Again, imagine you're standing in a bar, somebody's monologuing at you, you just want to get, you know, away, any excuse, I need to go to the loo, my friend's outside, whatever. It's because people aren't asking you enough questions. So it is all about questions. It's all about, you know, asking those questions that elicit an emotional response about how that person feels, what targets and goals they've got, how they want to be helped, what vision they have for the future, what do they think, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So first of all, questions are more powerful than statements. Then we want to focus on implications. And I'll go into this in a bit more detail, but in new salespeople, don't weigh in heavily. They go straight into solutions. Okay. Now the implication is basically where you create the need and the velocity in the in the sales cycle. Okay. So you do want to make sure you have your implication questions. Okay. It's a bit painful when you're when you're first coming into a sales role for the first time, but the implication questions are the ones that basically galvanize the need and allow the customer to say, right, okay, I need to do something about this now. The other thing is never ever sell your product. Give them the information about your product, but you've got to let the customer articulate their needs in line with your product. Oh, I can so see how that gamification would work for us, because at the end of the day, we could use it here, we could use it here, we could. No, you never ever sell your product. You never actually say this is the solution, right? You build the world of wonderment around it, and then let your customers basically sell it to themselves. And then of course, by how you build value is through dialogue. It's just through conversation. It's never closing. It's just through that soft articulation of what are you trying to do, you know, and does that align with what we've already got? So at the absolute center of it is obviously the customer and the relationship that you are able, the authentic relationship, right? The authentic, not fake. You care about their business, right? So first of all, you're about understanding what is their motivation. So, you know, we're very lucky, as we've just seen with our website, that we do get people coming to our website and wanting to talk to us about learner engagement, right? Learner engagement is a big problem. So by the time they've landed on our site and they drop into our pipeline and the salespeople are basically taking that, we can talk about, hey, what brought you here? Well, we've had a learning management platform. People don't really like it. It's kind of It's a problem. You can also reveal business goals. It's really vital that we upskill our people as quickly as possible, because at the end of the day, we've got new products coming into the market, X, Y, Z. You know, you need to get them to reveal what they're trying to do. And, you know, it's simple questions like, what are you tasked with? So this year, what are some of the biggest initiatives that, you know, your organization is trying to pursue, right? These are just big open questions that people love talking about, because they want you to hear that. They want you to hear why you're there, why you have come to us, because they're looking for the best solution. And it's only by giving that information that they can make sure that you are actually aligned. And also look for personal wins, right? So as much as customers are being motivated what their organization wants, they also want to be seen as highly successful in basically picking the right supplier or whatever it might be. So do identify those personal wins and, you know, make sure that they are celebrated, because the people that take a chance on, you know, let's say the Centrica pilot, you know, those are real innovators. I mean, they're doing something extraordinary and taking big risks. So identify the why in it for them personally as well. When you're talking about value building, here we're talking about when the customer is specifically, so once you've basically understood their kind of motivations, then we can go on to really kind of the hard things that the customer is trying to do, like articulate specific needs. I really need a solution that has just in time, you know, reporting. I really need a solution that basically allows me to, you know, integrate it with XYZ. We also want to do, you know, self-discovered solutions, and we also want to ensure that we are, because we are the secretary of managing the sales process, critically, there will always be people around that we need to talk to. So just asking that question. It feels like we're in a place in the sales process where, you know, do we need more information from other departments in the organization? And for us at Growth Engineering, we absolutely do need, we need security, we need legal, we need procurement, we need this, we need that. And so you need to basically allow them to be the best version of themselves. No shocks. You know, we know, having sold this, we're going to have to go through procurement, and that procurement process can take, you know, 6 months. Is now a good time for us to, do you want us to be introduced? Can we do anything to help you in that process? So it really is very much about making sure that you are looking after their interests internally, especially if they're new in the organization. They might not know how complicated this world is. So customer centric at the heart, you've got to care about, you know, your advocate, and you've really got to make them, you know, allow them to be the best version of themselves within their own organization. Okay, so the spin framework is really, really simple. Okay, it is 4 steps. Okay, the first one is situation gathering. Okay, tell me about yourself, what you do, you know, tell me a bit about your goals, tell me a bit about your history, where have you been, what, you know, what's gone wrong in the past. So basically it's all about like the current state and what brought them, you know, to you. The next thing is P. So these are problem identification and challenges. Well, what's brought us here is, you know, lack of engagement. The users don't really like it. It's not really working for us, etc., etc. Then we go into the I, and this is where new salespeople don't like being. Okay, but it is quite important to build up the I, because if you don't build up the I, you can find your sales process basically just lagging on and on and on. So what we want to do is we want to explore the implications of the problem. Okay, and this really is about allowing your learners to double down, allowing your customer to double down on the opportunity that you can see if they manage to get, you know, the perfect solution. So you want to do customer case studies in here. And oh, it's really interesting you say that, because when we started working with L'Oreal, you know, they were getting engagement rates of like 30%, but now, you know, they're up at kind of 99% every single day, and they're on the platform for 32 minutes a day. Can you imagine what that would be like? I mean, you know, also let me give you another case study. You know, when we started working with, you know, Centrica, you know, they had etc., right? So allow them to visualize what a different world would be. And then, of course, you're coming on to the need payoff. So this is when they go, you know what, it would be amazing. God, let me go back and talk to the organization and ensure that we can get the budget immediately to get this signed off. I hope you notice in that process, you have not actually sold once, right? All you're doing is you're taking them through an emotional journey to map their needs on to what you already have. And again, if you think about where we started at this course, it all goes back to the golden why. Then it goes into the marketing, ensuring that you've got the right content to drive the right leads into your pipeline, so that this is a genuinely, you know, not easy, but it is a process that aligns. You are not trying to force, you know, a round hole into a square peg, because you have been really clear on what you do and what you don't do, and, you know, what problems you solve. So it's important in terms of best practice with spin is to ask the questions in that logical frame, because by doing that, you're building up trust. Okay, you can't start on the implication questions. It's too raw, right? So you need to start with the solution, then the problem, then the implication, then the need questions. Okay, and because you're taking people on a journey, and it's trust building, it's value alignment, it's emotional resonance. For God's sake, this is 101. Take notes and basically look like you give a shit. I know that is, but it is amazing how many salespeople I get on calls and virtual stuff. They're not actually taking notes. They're not actually looking like they actually care. You do need to have that element, you know, having a notebook in front of you and making sure that you're actually diligently, you know, and also commenting it when you're following up on an email. You know, it was so interesting talking to you about XYZ. You know, you mentioned that Bill in your department, you know, these are important. It's all about showing that you are listening and you are using that information that you've listened to in order to help them find the perfect solution. Make sure that you are not asking yes, no questions, right? These are just lovely, open questions. What do you think about the future of L&D? What do you think about AI? You know, what's your company doing with regards to, you know, nice, open questions. Don't close the conversation down. But even then, you see, that's very natural. Like, you know, I'm sure you're all very, very charming people when you're out socializing with your friends. People don't usually ask, you know, binary yes, no questions. It is all about rapport building, is all about open, nice, open questions. What do you think about so it's natural, so don't over worry on that point. And then ultimately you do want to focus on business impact. So old-fashioned sales was very much about relationships and you know, in the new world it's just not like that. So basically what we want to do is we want to not basically spend a huge amount of time talking about our children and all of those kind of stuff. There is a place for that, but it's not really very worthwhile in a business, you know, context. We do want to stick to business. We want to stick to, you know, the fact that we both want to grow our business. But, you know, so you get that a lot in sort of, you know, very old-fashioned sales, you know, building on kind of relationships. Now, relationships are really important. Gerard and I were talking about the success we've had with, you know, people that we've worked for in our industry for years and years and years. And of course, it is very important, but I can singly say, hand on heart, that the people that I've had these long-term relationships, I don't necessarily know a lot about that family. I don't necessarily go on holiday with them. I don't do all of that kind of stuff. I just protect their interests as leaders in the L&D world. So, you know, do focus on that, because you will lose that air of professionalism, I think, if you play on the other side. And then the other thing is let the customers decide the value themselves. Like, you don't need to close them. If you've done a good job all the way through, it's fairly easy. They will arrive at that conclusion that actually your brand will help their business get to a better place. The other thing that's really important is that when you're in a business to business setting, the person that you may be talking to might not have the total control over the decision making. Okay, so really, again, new salespeople really struggle with this. They're like, but I'm talking to the guy. The guy's got the money and he's going to basically sign it off. Well, not really, right? So typically what will happen is you might have the initiator who starts the buying process. So this is, in our case, would be, you know, a very junior person basically has been, you know, asked to find some new, you know, products that, you know, might work for them. And they have really no part in the decision-making process whatsoever. It's just, if you're not on the list, you're never going to be on the list. So this might be procurement. So you've got the initiators, then you've got the users. So, you know, this is typically the users are saying, well, do I like the product? Do I not? How does it taste? But again, that's only kind of 15%. Then you've got the decision makers. So the decision makers maybe have 25% authority on the decision. So these are the people like, you know, procurement, or the people, the budget holders. Then you've got the gatekeepers. So these are the people that, you know, basically might stop you from talking to certain people. We have this in when we're trying to get through to procurement. And then basically you've got the influencers. And these influencers here are possibly the most important people you want to target, because those are the people that can basically move all these people. So in another model, they're called advocates. So you want to try and find your advocates. Now, for us, a lot of the time, it is the first people that come and talk to us because they've seen us online and they're like, wow, these people really do. They are interested in, you know, learner engagement and all those other fun stuff. And so these people can push things through. But just be aware that typically no decision in a business is taken just by one person. So there will always be other people floating around, and you need to basically gently take your, you know, your advocate, which is hopefully down here, through and just ask them the question, who else is involved in the decision? How can I help them, get more familiar with, the project that we're trying to work towards or we're working through, right? So just make sure that you understand that, because for new salespeople coming to the market, they don't really understand that or have an appreciation how long it takes to basically make sure all of those people are ticked off in the box. So in terms of kind of advanced spin techniques, it would be basically, first of all, what we want to do is make sure you ask the questions in sequence. We want to make sure that's nice open-ended questions, so no closed questions. We want to focus on the root causes. So this is so interesting to me that, let's say, I'm in the middle of trying to sell a learning management platform. So these learning management platforms are huge enterprise-wide. They touch every employee in an organization. But we don't want to talk about the technology so much. What we want to talk about is learning theory and learning philosophy and the reason why we have created the platform. So if you focus on root causes, that's where you get better alignment. So the feeling that has basically inspired you. So it's that golden why here. So you really want to focus on those root causes and why that golden why aligns with that organization, So they say things that are aligned to your golden why. And then finally, 2 ears, one mouth. So in terms of what we're going to do with the impact is we are going to try, where it makes sense, to give examples of the time and the reward they could have for moving. Okay, so we're not saying buy my product. What we're saying is, by working with us, it aligns to, your customers, what your customers are looking for in terms of, a new journey experience. It basically offers something on the menu, which, potentially gives an insight to, the wonders of Andorra, these kind of things. So you're not selling the product, but you're basically linking the problems that they think they might have or the opportunities they might have to what you've already got. And the other thing is by putting in a sense of urgency, you're not closing, but you're saying, the following fabulous organizations, we use it a lot, we work with the biggest brands in the world. Apple basically got us to consult for us, and then they like, oh my God, you really must know what you're talking about. I really do need to get these people in as soon as humanly possible. So naturally add urgency, but don't force the close. Okay. And then if you can quantify the implications through case studies, do. Connecting to return on investment is obviously the next step, but sometimes it can seem like a really blunt instrument. But if it is a product that potentially has a huge amount of, it's a commodity product, or even that there's a lot of competition, they might want to see return on investment done on their specific use case. But this impact focus is important because it allows you to move the sale forward with a sense of urgency. Okay. But in order to do that, you have to have values alignment. So you can't do the impact focus if you haven't done the S and the P. So with the building urgency, you can always tell when you haven't spent enough time in the S&P area, right? The solution and the problem area, because you will ask a salesperson, when is it going to close? And they'll go, I just don't know. It's just going through the process. So it's kind of interesting how people, even really good salespeople don't ask enough implication questions to understand when it's going to close. So, that is also the other thing is in Neil Rackham's, when he went back for further research and he looked at really highly successful salespeople versus average salespeople, what he found is this impact focus was the difference between really successful salespeople and not so successful salespeople. But it is an advanced technique. I mean, there's no question, because it does feel a bit awkward. But it is really important, this impact element. Okay, so this is basically where you want to spend your time. Okay, so situation questions, you should be spending about 10% of your time on situation questions. You should be spending about 35% of your time on problem questions and problem alignment. So what are you trying to achieve? How are you trying to achieve it? What's gone wrong in the past? How do you see the future moving forward? Then you want to spend 35% in the implication questions. If you don't spend enough time here, you won't be able to to do effective implication questions, because you just won't have enough information. So you really need to really understand what is driving that customer, and that's what you do through problem questions. And then implication is, what is the implication of not doing anything about it? So, you know, imagine a world where if you were going to go for this solution, you know, what would be the difference between that solution and the solution that we've been discussing? So it's interesting when we look at, let's say, you know, the work we've done with L'Oreal or the work that we've done with Centrica, how, you know, the business impact, you know, has been this. How do you see that, you know, reflected on your own learning culture or whatever it might be? Okay. But you can see here, this is 70% of it, guys. 70%. 70% is here, right? We're not doing a lot of closing here. So this is basically the needs payoff, and this is where the needs payoff is the close, when the customer should come to you and say, yeah, no, we're ready, let's go. And that, you know, there is faffing in this area, but the customer should come to you, if you've done the sales process right, should come to you and go, eager to move ahead. Thanks very much for, you know, the time you've spent, you know, explaining and working with me on this solution. And then bosh, here is the purchase order. Okay. But I always think it's useful to really understand where you are in the sale. So ultimately the output of all of this is so this is basically your homework, right? Thinking about spin, thinking about how you create value, and what does your pipeline look like? I can't tell you what your pipeline will look like. I can't tell you, you know, what questions that you will have to ask. I do know if you shove them through, you know, any AI and go, I've just learned this value selling model, I've just learned about this spin model, can you give me some questions for each stage of spin? Then it will do that for you very, very easily. But also the pipeline has, you know, other things in it as well as just spin and value selling. So, you know, these might be some of the ideas. So first of all, you know, have you got the right buyer? Are you talking to, you know, a researcher, or are you talking to a budget holder, or, you know, whatever? What are their goals? Why do they want to change? What are they looking for? Then you want to map your 4 Ps to them. Like, is this actually a good fit? Because if it's not, let's just get them out of the pipeline. And we've had loads of those. People will call us and go, you know, we really want content, or we really want, you know, compliance, or we really want, well, you can't talk to us then. So out of the pipeline you go. Have you got a common understanding of how the solution would work? So, you know, if we get somebody who comes to us and goes, well, we want it to work like this, can you change it? Well, the answer to that is yes, we can change it, but only if you've got some budget. So if they're like, well, we don't really have a budget, can you not do it just because, you know, I'm nice and you're nice? The answer to that is, at this moment, it's not right for us to work. You're, again, out the pipeline. And then finally, you want to negotiate and close steps. Remember, you are in charge of this pipeline, and you are in charge of getting people out of it. It is not good to have tons of people in your pipeline, right? What is good is to get them out of the pipeline so you can focus on the people that are actually going to make it to the bottom of the funnel. Okay. So big is not great when it comes to sales. It's making sure that you've got that values alignment through your pipeline in order to basically bring them lovingly and full of advocacy for you at the bottom of that pipeline, right? So this is, you know, a detailed slide, and we are coming to the very end, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this would basically be an example of, you know, at a super high level, what growth engineering would go through. So first of all, as soon as the prospect comes in, it's like, are you a big enough size for us? You know, what is your, what kind of current things do you do with your L&D budget? You know, what kind of things, you know, do you want from your learning technology stack? What have you had before? Like, do you even understand what technology stack is? And then basically saying, you know, who are you in the organization? And, you know, who else is going to be involved in this decision? Then you go on to, you know, the situation. So, you know, let's deep dive. What is your role and responsibility? How many, you know, employees do you train manually? You know, basically getting in and around the S. Then we're going into problem discovery. So why hasn't it worked in the past? Do you see what we're doing here? We haven't even got on. We've never even mentioned the product so far, right? Like, you know, what challenges have you got? Why is it important that you move now? You know, what is, you know, what is the impact on the organization when people don't do training? You're just highlighting all of those awkward areas that currently, you know, maybe they're not thinking about. So you just really want to have an opportunity to almost kind of let them talk about some of the problems and the challenges in their business, right? And the more you can do this, the more trust, you know, you build. Then we go into kind of solution development, and this is all about implications. So do you agree that, you know, so you got problem and implication questions, and then you basically got the need payoff. So are we aligned? Do we think this is going to work? Does it make sense for your organization? Does it make sense for my organization? And what's going to be the result? What does the future look like, right? And that is the, you know, the value proposition. Basically, that's quantifying and going, this makes total sense for me. This makes sense for you. It's a low cost way of you basically, you know, understanding what's going on. And that is the value proposition. And you want to make sure that that value proposition is articulated throughout any people you speak to in your buyer's organization, right? So you've done the hard work, okay, with the person in the buyer's organization. Now it's about basically making sure that's well understood. So when it goes into, let's say, procurement, or it goes into whatever, it's really clear for that person to say, it's a no-brainer for us to do this, because basically, you know, this is basically the value proposition that this is going to deliver to us. And then that makes it really easy to go into proposal and negotiation. And no matter how tough you know, procurement are with driving down the cost, you can say, look, dude, we already know that you're going to save, like, you know, $7 million on this thing, and we're asking you for $500,000. Like, what are you playing at? Like, clearly, you know, there is a huge, you know, opportunity for you to XYZ, right? So here we want to make, by making the solution development as clear as humanly possible, it makes the proposal and negotiation go much more smoothly. And they sign with a big smile on their faces, because they're like, I've just saved this organization, or I've just improved this organization, or but they smile and they're happy, right? So that is the way to do it right. Okay, so in terms of your homework, what you want to do is you want to utilize the gift of AI, and you want to basically put value selling and spin, and basically a description of your golden why, any collateral you've already done, and you want to look at what your pipeline is, right? So you want a list of questions that you can pull through. And it might not be 4 stages, okay? Your process might be 2 stages. It might be 5 stages. It might be, you know, I don't know what it is. The more complex your solution is, possibly, you know, the more stages you will have in your pipeline. But basically what you want to do is you want to understand the questions and information you need to secure at each stage. And you want to understand what closes out that process. And that is, it might be a work in progress. It might be something that you are continually going back to and saying, I don't know why that stalled where it stalled. Maybe there's something I can add there to understand whether the buyer is moving gracefully through the process, okay? But it is a really good idea to understand what does close out the process and keep reviewing that. Remember when we were talking before about, you know, it's your responsibility to push people out of the sales process without really understanding what closes each step out. It's really difficult to know whether that person should be pushed out of the sales process or not. The next thing is I'm going to put a bit of pressure on you, and I'm going to say you need to know what your annual targets are. Yeah. I mean, if you're a small business and you haven't necessarily got shareholders that are hanging it over, in a worst case scenario, just use the compound annual growth rate of your organization, because nobody can really argue with that. So, you know, if the gin market is growing at 13%, then so be it. That's your target. Or, you know, obviously you might, as a startup, you might be looking at a bit more aggressively than that. But you've got to have an annual target, and you've got to break that down quarterly, monthly, and weekly, because you've got to know if you've got the right amount of new opportunities coming into the top of your pipeline in order to know what's going to come out the other end. And the other thing is that you really need to start thinking about the velocity of the pipeline. Okay, so here what I'm talking about is conversion rates. So yeah, if you're starting from scratch, then the way I would do it is basically look at the income you need and then times it by 2. So if it's just you on your own, that's basically how McKinsey work and all the consultancy agencies. They go, you know what, it's 1 for the salary and then it's 2 for the organization. And that will give you enough buffer to hopefully but will be ambitious, right? So if you just say, no, my target is what I need to live on, that's not ideal. It also means that you will have other revenue that you can put in to the business, like for marketing or whatever it might be. So if you're starting from scratch, this is what I want to earn, times it by 3, right? As the minimum, right? But if you're not, if you've got an established business like we have at Growth Engineering, minimum should be keeping up with where the market is going, right? Compound annual growth rates. So yeah, that's basically the idea. And then ensure that you do have the resources and documentation to make you as efficient as possible. So when you're moving through sales, remember, it's probably only part of our job. It's not our full-time job. So you do want to make sure that you've got pre-done proposal, pre-done pilot ideas, pre-done articles. And this is, again, where when you go back to the beginning of the course, we started with the golden why, communicating your golden why, making sure that you've got the resources and marketing to back up that golden why, so that when you come to the sales process, you can just push them in that direction, right? You just push them in that direction and go, this is all the stuff I've got. This is basically what what it looks like. So that is your homework. And remember, failure is part of the journey. Okay, so even if you put yourself in a target, okay, that you don't hit, at least you're strong enough to put in a target, right? So, failure is part of the journey. And really, please, just make sure that you're moving forward. Sam, I would love to hear from you, especially as your insight this time yesterday. The last comment was absolutely smashed it out of the park. Very much appreciate that.
So just a quick point on spin selling. So spin selling, actually, as Juliet mentioned, it came out of observation as opposed to a created system. So it was due to observation, and it was actually, and it seems, and I'm not, trying to be sort of label it, but effectively it came out of B2C selling. And effectively, it can be very short. So this is the thing that often people miss. They think it needs to be long, as in half an hour meeting. So for example, I'm going to Andorra. Yeah, I'm driving to Andorra. So effectively, if you think of it like that, and I'm just throwing out a model because then sometimes it's easier to think. The situation is I'm driving to Andorra. The situation is also it snows in Andorra. The problem is my tires may not be able to grip on the snow because I may not be able to get up the hill. Juliet lives up a hill, therefore I may not be able to get there. The implication is that I will have to park at the bottom of the hill or I may crash. Yeah, the implication is that it could cost me thousands to thousands of pounds. Therefore, the need is snowshoes, yeah, which cost me 50 quid. 50 quid is significantly less than thousands of pounds and a lot of hassle. So effectively, by looking at it in a very simple way like that, you can then create your spin system. So you see it on good websites. I bought a Channel Tunnel ticket yesterday to get my van across. It went through. It was like, yeah, you're going to Andorra. There are roadworks up ahead. When you're coming in, that can cause delays. If you don't have insurance, you may not be able to get on board. You may be refused carriage. You may have to cancel your ticket. It could be more expensive. Would you like insurance? And so it can be really simple. So sometimes, if it helps, think about spin like that, because it happens all the time, every day. And the chances are, if you're out and about today, you will see spin selling in action, even though people don't know they're doing it and you don't know it's been done on you.
Fantastic. I mean, brilliant question. Soraya, yeah.
Hi, I just had a bit of a question. I know that we're not kind of focusing on sales and the actual kind of prices side of it, but I just wondered, and I know that you mentioned previously to try and not ever discount your price, but I just wondered, when it comes to the proposal part and having those kind of proposals pre-written, as it were, do you have a different proposal, theoretical proposal for a large size company like L'Oreal than you do to a smaller size company in terms of how many bums on seats you're going to get for your course, for example? And the reason I'm asking that is when we've been kind of doing some door-to-doors in Andorra when we started developing the gin, and we knew we had the recipe. And one of the owners, who has a specialist alcohol shop in Andorra, was really kind of clear on the fact that he didn't want to be underpriced, that he wanted the trade price to be the same across everyone we're selling to. But obviously, if you then go to like a big chain like a Carrefour or a River or whatever, and they're buying a lot more stock, they'll be trying to drive the price down. So I don't know. I was just wondering what the approach is in terms of, do I need to try and keep also so it's simple at our end and we don't have a different price for 350 different businesses? That's really messy. Do you have kind of a different approach to large scale businesses as you do to small businesses that are kind of preset and you just kind of say, this is the price, these are the kickbacks or the offers that we can offer you according to this number of sales?
I mean, in my view, I'll obviously let Cosmo pile in because I'm sure he's got some good insight as well. But from my point of view, for me, there is only one pricing structure. And the reason for that is it's just too damn complicated. So when you said it's just too damn complicated, yeah, that for me is exactly the way we try and do it. Like you might get into procurement and they might be like say, let's say Carrefour as you, there might be things you could add to the deal, like length of contract. So I want you to, take this amount up front. And, as a result, I will give, a certain amount of discount, but only off the list price. So that is my kind of learnt experience. Complexity is not good in any organization. And when it comes to price, it's like, oh, horrible. So, obviously from the big companies, you will get pressure. But I would definitely say keep it simple. Bye, Jared. Thanks very much for your questions, as always. Cosmo, have you got anything to say on price?
Yeah, no, I was going to sort of say, like, I think what's really interesting about that is about that exact problem is it's less of a price problem and more of an information problem. I think you'll find that the person, in the specialty alcohol shop, if you turn around and say, oh, absolutely, we keep all of our prices the same if you're buying this quantity. That's like the ultimate way to respond to it, because it's like, yeah, absolutely. Anyone who's buying the same amount as you, you're going to be priced exactly the same. We're really conscious about how you do it. And that gives you that same sort of route around for, oh, Carrefour. Well, like I said, we keep the same price for the same quantity. They're buying 10 times that. We're more than happy to give you that price as well if you're buying 10 times quantity. I think always whenever you're doing negotiations and things like that, there's a really good book called Negotiation Genius. And they talk about this idea of like Pareto deal making, which is where often you need to try and think of the unobvious metric. So, for example, exactly as Juliet pointed out, the most obvious one is always price. People are always arguing over price. However, time of that payment is also a really crucial element. So to a startup, something like us, it's really important that we get money as quickly and as early on as possible. So I'm more than happy to take a minor price reduction to get more money quick. And so looking at things in that sort of way is a really good way of doing it. And then in that, whenever you're in a negotiation, the two things I always try to keep in mind is information and influence. Like a lot of people will say, we've never sold it at a price this low before, right? That's a key thing of influence rather than information, because it doesn't mean it's the lowest they can offer. It's, those sorts of things I think are really important, and just trying to find the unobvious metric to measure things. But yeah, so just to finish on your thing, say we sell it at this price consistently for this quantity, and that sort of, and then that tackles it, and it means you're also available for Carrefour.
So much wisdom in the room, and so interesting, right? I mean, it's just like, oh, so much to go on. So look, guys, thank you very much for joining today. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We're getting dangerously close to automation, which I think is an absolute winner. We're all going to learn a lot on that one. So yeah, thanks very much for participation, and have a great day. See you tomorrow. Bye.